I am now pleased to introduce you to your trainer today, Julie Jarvis, PhD. Dr. Julie Jarvis is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing for over 20 years in the treatment of substance use disorders, as well as mood and anxiety disorders. Dr. Jarvis obtained her PhD in clinical psychology from Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, and went on to complete a postdoctoral fellowship in addiction psychology from Mount Sinai School of Medicine. Dr. Jarvis has worked with individuals, groups, couples, and families in a variety of treatment settings, including outpatient, intensive outpatient, and long-term residential care. Now pleased to turn it over to our trainer today, Dr. Julie Jarvis.
Thank you, Morgan, for that introduction and for your technical support, and for all you do at the Women's Consortium, Connecticut Women's Consortium. It's an honor for us here at CMC Foundation for Change to work with you all and the wonderful work that you're doing. And thank you to all of you who have taken the time to be here with us today. I love this work. I love what we do at the foundation, and I love it even more when I get to share it with all of you, and you get to share it with your families and your friends and everybody that you know. And that's really what we're all about here at the foundation. Our mission is really to get effective and accessible evidence-based tools for change. So this is stuff that's been looked at in the literature, that's been evaluated through a scientific lens, and has been found to be effective in helping people with substance use issues. So that's the kind of skills that we are here to talk about today, and in the other weeks coming up and in the weeks past. So if you missed any of the weeks past, all the recordings are, all the trainings have been recorded. So I encourage you, while you don't need to have been to those, to enjoy this one, to just pop in and see what else we're offering here in our Invitation to Change model. Part of our mission is also to provide a sense of community. So substance abuse is incredibly isolating, and when we bring people together here as a community, it allows us to just feel less isolated and alone in the pain that this problem of substance use provides. Our mission is also to change the conversation about substance use. A lot of what's out there is shame, isolation, stigma, judgment, and our mission is really to move that to compassion, kindness, love, understanding, and on, and hopefully you will really get the flavor of that today. And finally, to encourage hope and compassion for all. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so we really want to help you. And last week I spoke here on self-compassion. We really want to help you find compassion for yourself, compassion for your loved ones and all who are suffering, and also just to hold on to that sense of hope that even when things look really dark, that there are a lot of ways that we can help. And this is what we're here to help you all with today. So this is just a quick slide to offer the opportunity for anyone who's been at any of the last sessions. If you had anything you wanted to follow up on, any questions, any challenges. Don't want to stick here too long just in case there's not. Okay, so I don't see any hands up. If you do have questions, feel free to email Morgan. You can also reach out to me via Morgan and the Women's Consortium, and we're happy, any of us trainers are happy to help you with anything that you kind of have a lingering question around. So again, these are what we're going to talk about today, specifically the communication skills, is just different ways in which we believe that family members have a tremendous impact on their loved ones' behaviors. And a lot of people, before they come to one of our trainings, they've been told by very well-meaning loved ones or other organizations, whatever it is, that to let go, to let people hit bottom, that there's not actually anything that you can do, that you just need to let people kind of find their own way. And while there can be some degree of element in of self-care in that. It also can feel tremendously invalidating or out of sync with someone's values or what feels natural to them. They want to love their child. They want to be there for them. They want to help. And so we are here to really help you fill in that gap and to develop those skills. So there's two ways that we kind of break down the skills. There's the helping with awareness section. So that's all the work that we do on ourselves as a helper to better understand substance use, to better understand why people use substances, to better understand what it does for them, to better understand our own feelings and reactions and actions and history and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the skills that I think sometimes people get maybe a little bit more excited about because we actually get to do something. This is something that we get to do that's different. And communication is incredibly important. And so I'm thrilled to be here today talking about communication. And one of the ways that we think about that is we talk about the red lights and the green lights in communication and how to really start to understand when we're walking into something where our loved one is saying, please, I'm not interested in talking about that right now, and what impact we can have to turn some of those lights green, to open up the conversations, and to create, again, it's a marathon, just to really create this ongoing dynamic of openness in the relationship. Practice is the key. So this is some of you who have been here in our other sessions may have seen this. This is our little visual model of the invitation to change. And there's 3 components to it: helping with understanding, helping with action, and helping with awareness. So once again, we're in this action section. We're talking about communication skills today, these red lights and green lights, but this is something that you'll just see repeatedly. And we repeat it as just a way to kind of remind us of all these different ways in which we're able to help. And each week of this training, we go through one of the different categories here on the wheel. So when I was first kind of reviewing and preparing again for this training, I was just struck by this quote again. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Or I would even say the illusion how it has taken place, right? We've all had those moments where we thought we said something, somebody else heard something else, or the conversation never even happened. It happened in our head. We thought we said it. We did. I mean, there's so many levels where we can change this dimension that is so important in the parent-child relationship and the parent-partner relationship. And I'm hoping that one of the things that people often find with these communication skills is that these things help you not only in your dynamics with your loved one, but also at work, in your friendships, in every relationship. It really helps to get more skillful in the area of communication. So one of the things we do in these trainings is to really reflect before we move into where we're going. We spend a few minutes kind of reflecting on our understanding, and I will open it up after I do this, but and you can use the chat to kind of comment if there's things that you are relating to or identify with or that you've experienced. But we'll spend a few minutes just reflecting on what family members have heard, experienced, been told around communication with someone who's using substances, right? So sometimes when I'm working with families, one of the things I'll hear is that things are two extremes. There's either shouting and really out of control emotions, or there is complete silence and everybody shuts down and there's no real understanding of how to actually talk to each other, right? So we've got this lack of skill that's disallowing us to really have access to that middle space where all the communication happens. So we're shouting or we're silent. So a little bit of hopelessness we hear sometimes. Conversations don't really help. They just need to hit rock bottom. I mean, this is something that is not true. Conversations, people are really able to change at any level of consequence. It it is a function of costs and benefits, which we talked about a little bit last week, and behaviors make sense. But the idea that someone has to hit bottom before they're willing to make a change, that's really not held up in the research. That's not something that's also my 20 some years of clinical experience have demonstrated also that that's just not true. I have people come into my office at all different levels of consequence in their life, many of whom are not at rock bottom. And they're very able to make a change. So you're just talking about the addict brain, right? So kind of labeling, judging. For some people, that idea might be helpful. And for other people, it's really insulting. It's really pejorative. It's really offensive. And it's just pretty narrow. It doesn't give you any place to go, right? If this is all we're up against, then what can you do? You're just kind of stuck. You're hitting like a stuck sign there, but that's just not what appears to be true in the data. I say the things over and over, but he, she, they just don't listen. The therapist, and this one we're gonna talk today about like how we communicate. What are the ways in which we're communicating? What are ways that we can communicate that increase, that increase the chances that the person that we're talking to can hear us? And again, this is something that's helpful with partners. I've done so many trainings where people will go home and they'll say, oh my gosh, I used this with my partner and it went so much better. So this is just for really any communication skills at all, right? That how can we increase the chances that somebody is going to hear what I am attempting to say or what message I'm trying to get across. And therapists said we're codependent enablers. These are not really words that we use. Again, maybe this is something that for some people they find very helpful and it's a shortcut to them to some type of functioning that they're working on trying to change. For us, it leaves out the fact that we can help and that wanting to help doesn't make you codependent. It doesn't make you an enabler. It doesn't make you pathological in some way, that it's a natural thing for parents to want to help their child. And so we want you to give you the skills to be able to do that so that you maximize your chances of being effective. So that's really, if anyone has any comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. If there's anything that you felt like you related to or identified with, but that's really kind of the major points that we've heard that people up until this point have experienced. So this is our slide in our presentation that brings us to this new perspective. So something that we are looking to do here today is to help you all feel a new perspective around communication and what those skills can do for you and how you can be effective, and to feel confident and empowered in your ability to talk to your loved one. So we hope that you walk away from this today having gained at least the awareness, and we'll talk about how skills take practice, but that at least the beginning and the awareness that communication can be a very, very powerful tool. And there it is, communication is a powerful tool, right? So our words matter. What we say, how we say it, when we say it, all kinds of things. We're going to talk about that today. Positive, collaborative communication can function in a lot of important ways. It can turn down the heat. We've all probably had that moment where we know that maybe by saying something, we're actually going to kind of escalate the person, or maybe we don't know, but we just recognize that it happens, right? And that can kind of make the problem worse. It also has the opposite effect where, and maybe hopefully some of you have had this experience as well, and if you haven't, hopefully you will after today, where you choose to react in a certain way that allows the heat in the conversation to be turned down. And so that's a really important skill to have, right? So am I throwing gasoline on it, or am I extinguishing that fire? Those are a really important difference, and you have the power to make that difference. Communication can encourage positive behavior. So if we think about how do we try to encourage our loved one to do more of the things that are healthy for them? What are ways that we can do that are collaborative and loving and not forced or really trying to run the show, but we can encourage them to do more of the things that are good for them. It can also work in terms of shifting someone's ambivalence. If someone is ambivalent about whether or not they want to make a change around something, the way that we talk to them about their ambivalence, first by just recognizing that it's there, but allowing them to share with us, and we're going to talk about the skills that help to open up communication when someone's ambivalent, that can really help to shift someone's motivation. That we can move them closer to change, or we can move them further from change. And that's not to say we're responsible for it. It's just to say that we as individuals can have an impact, and we want you to know that you have that opportunity with your children. And on the reverse of that, negative, non-collaborative communication, confrontation, shouting, labeling, which has really been a lot of what people have been told they're supposed to do, is like, you need to confront them, you need to break it down, you need to be really direct and all that kind of stuff. That what the research shows is that those kind of communication styles actually close it off. And if we do think about this as a marathon and not a sprint, we really want to keep those doors open. We want to keep those doors of communication open with our loved one because it's our most valuable tool. So communicating collaboratively is critical for inviting and supporting change, and these skills help shift the red lights. And what we mean by red lights are those times when our loved one is kind of shutting down or withdrawing or directly saying to us, I don't want to talk to you about that. So how do we help shift those red lights into the green lights, right? The green lights being that willingness on their part just to kind of hang out for an extra minute or two in the kitchen while you're making dinner, or their patience and sort of interest in engaging with you in whatever the conversation is. So listening collaboratively, right? We're working as a team, we're working together on this. And we'll talk about simply listening, how to just plain listen, which is shockingly incredibly hard. We're going to do an exercise today where we demonstrate, and I encourage you to all try this, even if you're not part of our role play today. I encourage you to try it on your own, because the idea of not saying anything at all when someone else is speaking, you'll be very surprised as to how challenging that can be, but it's so important for someone to feel just completely heard. And then we're going to talk about the love skills, the first of which, the L, is, we got a lot of acronyms here, but L is for listening, and the OARS, those are all the different types of listening skills. You'll know more about what that means at the end of today. The information sandwich, so offering information collaboratively, again, asking permission if someone to give advice, that kind of stuff. We'll talk about that. And requesting collaboratively. So if we want to ask something of someone, how do we do it in a way that we increase the chances that they will be less defensive and more open to hearing our request and not feeling judged and shamed by it. So changing the red lights to green, times when moving forward is helpful, other times it's not. Learning to pause and to understand. Oh my goodness, it just told me my okay, sorry. Times when moving forward is helpful, other times, okay, learning to pause and understand what you're seeing and hearing and feeling, right? So the energy in communication when parents are understandably terrified can move rather quickly. So we want to just slow that down, pay attention. What am I seeing right now? What am I hearing? What am I feeling? Really slowing down, dropping into your body and noticing all those cues. The desire to, when under stress, red lights can push us to speed up, right? When we're feeling worried, we want to hurry. We want to solve the problem. We don't want to just talk about somebody's ambivalence when we're afraid they're going to die. We want them to just stop. And that makes sense. What we know is that if we can roll that back and slow down and be patient, that actually is much more helpful from that person than putting our foot on the gas. And just to kind of continue with the metaphor, the desire to get through the lights leads to accidents. Developing a collaborative communication approach may be the most important step in creating breathing room for change, right? If our loved ones do not feel like they can talk to us, I don't actually know what we have, right? Like, we really need to be able to communicate with them. And those are the tools that we're here to work on today. And I know sometimes it feels like our job is to fix it, right? But our job is to really just walk with them and to help them along the way to get to their change process. In so many ways we can do that. Communication skills take practice and patience. And I say this all the time. You know, I teach this. I've been teaching it for a long time. I love it. I believe in it. I understand it. And in the moment, my teenager, it can sometimes be kind of hard, right? So it's practice and patience with our loved ones, patience with ourselves. And as long as there is an open communication, none of us need to be perfect, right? We just need to really be patient and to practice. So how does this help? Changes the tone of our interactions in the home, reducing conflict, helping a loved one's voice get a lot stronger. So we want their change to get stronger. Develops a collaborative approach to helping others. So we're not the expert. I, as a psychologist, am not the expert. We as family members are not experts. People are experts of their own lives. It increases the chances that family members' suggestions will be heard rather than ignored or argued against, right? So if we communicate effectively, people don't have to become as defensive and shut down. It also increases the likelihood of being validated, receiving empathy, listening, a positive cycle that becomes self-sustaining. Okay, so here we are before I do that, let me just pause for one moment here and ask if anybody has any questions on anything that I said, anything they want to either pop in the chat or feel free just to say out loud. Okay, again, you're all welcome to circle back if anything comes into your mind or you just don't feel comfortable doing it in this space. You're welcome to circle back to us. So the love skills. So here's our acronym for love: listening, which we're going to talk about and role play here in just a minute. We're going to talk about a lot of different ways to listen. Offering. So if we do want to give information, how do we do that in a way that someone can hear us rather than shutting them down? Validating. So it comes to understand somebody else's experience, and empathizing, sort of feeling compassion for their experience as well. Okay, so we're going to practice. I love dogs. And anytime I see a dog, I feel really happy. So we're going to practice a little role play today. So in your packet, you all should have some exercises there. And one of the pages in your exercise should say simply listening. And if you have that, great. If you don't have that for some reason, you can just let Morgan know and she will make sure that you do. But I'm hoping that you all have it. So for this exercise, I'm going to ask for volunteers if anyone is willing. So what this is an opportunity to practice sort of stepping into the experience of being the person who's thinking about making a change, right? But in this case, we're just going to have someone be the speaker. They're just going to talk about anything for 90 seconds that has been difficult for you recently. You can completely make it up. It does not need to be a real thing. It can be something that you're just pretending that's been difficult for you recently, or you'd rather something that you felt proud about recently, something that you feel good about. And we're going to ask the speaker to speak for 90 seconds. And I need another volunteer to be the listener. And I would encourage, even if you're not the volunteer, just to sort of drop into that role of being the listener and noticing what comes up for you as you're just listening, and that's all that you're doing. You're not trying to solve, you're not fixing, but those impulses might be there, right? And so that's what I want you to notice. But the listener just listens that time for 90 seconds without saying anything. Okay, so I have some volunteers to do that. Go ahead, ladies.
Okay, so something that I have been really struggling with recently while working at home, I think, is just like time management and just stress management in general. I thought when we first started working at home several months ago that it was going to be a great opportunity for me to have more time for myself. And I feel like what's actually happening is the reverse. It's kind of like I just wake up in the morning and I sit down and I start to do my job, and then all of a sudden it's nighttime and there's stuff to do around the house, and every day is kind of just bleeding together, it feels like, which is just like having a pretty large effect on my stress levels. And I'm feeling like I'm having just a little bit more of a difficult time making space for myself, checking in with myself, making sure I'm sleeping the amount that I should be sleeping, making sure I'm drinking enough water, just because everything feels like it's all like gas pedal, just keep going forward. It's harder for me to remember to hit the brake. But I mean, the good thing about that is that I've definitely felt like I can connect with my family members and call them more often that I'm home. And I say that that's a good thing, but also noting that that also has been taking a lot of my emotional energy. So I'm finding that I don't like to just be sitting at home doing nothing. I find reasons to fill the space. And the way that results is that I realize I still haven't had like a second to just be doing nothing, which is definitely hard.
Okay, Kayla, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Morgan, and thank you everyone else who was participating. So let's talk about that a little bit. Kayla, what was that like for you to just speak without, sometimes when we do this in the trainings, we'll tell people like, don't make any facial expression, like, don't even nod your head, because it's really hard. We want to like let somebody know we're listening. What was it like for you, Kayla, to just talk for 90 seconds while Morgan just listened?
Yeah. The thing that's strange at first is that I think as people, we naturally are looking for some kind of an affirmation. So like I kept looking at Morgan's face, like hoping to see some kind of a like, even just like a yeah, or like something. But then as the time went on, I started to feel like the open space for me to just talk was giving me an open space to think about what I was talking about more than I normally would have, or like I knew I had this free range, so I could just really explore what I was feeling.
Wonderful, right? So if we sort of extrapolate this to someone, thinking about a loved one who may be struggling with a substance use issue, if we jump in too quickly, we're starting to kind of do the thinking for them in a way, right? And if I'm hearing you, Kayla, it sounds like your brain was then able to just kind of go with it and to really think more about all these different connections that you were noticing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Morgan, what was that like for you?
It was really challenging not to use like nonverbal kind of communication to engage with Kayla. I definitely, like in some ways it felt okay to not respond verbally. There were lots of moments where I might have said like, yeah, or like me too, or something like that, kind of chimed in. But I felt like it was okay for me to not do that if I was making lots of really kind of engaging like nods or, even just facial expressions. And so I think that that is a way of really kind of still communicating. And maybe if I'd kind of had to try to restrict that, that would have been even harder, because I felt like I was still able in some ways to kind of communicate understanding or affirmation non-verbally. So definitely a challenge, I think, to even kind of cut out the nonverbal ways that we can communicate when somebody's listening. I could see, like in this case, there were a lot of kind of positive facial expressions or ways I was communicating. But if maybe this had been a more difficult topic, and I had felt myself having kind of responses that were negative, that even my kind of nonverbal communication could have potentially affected Kayla, if I'd been like, looking frustrated or something like that. So it was interesting to kind of sit for.
That's such a great point, right? That depending on like the content, right, and how whatever our emotional reaction is, like you might have been identifying, so but like yes, I get it, I feel the same way, right? But if this is someone that's telling you about their heroin use last night, or the car they got in when somebody was wasted, like your reaction might be incredibly different, and so to the point that reaction has the potential to shut down or keep a conversation going, right? So we really want Kayla, and one of the theories that the invitation to change comes out of is motivational interviewing, and motivational interviewing is really this way to, help people kind of find their own way to their motivation. We guide them there, we help them get there, right? But we want her to find her way. And so Kayla having that time to really think about that was a really, really important piece. So thank you both for participating. And normally we would flip this and have you switch roles, but I am just going to be aware of the time and we'll just keep it there. But I encourage you all, do this exercise. If you didn't do it here with us today, do it with somebody that you know, do it with a friend on the phone, make some jokes about it, laugh about it. But it's so important, and it's so fascinating to see what happens in like a little 90-second window, right? It's just 90 seconds, but so much comes up in that time. So that's a skill, simply listening, right? Just listening. All right, thanks so much to our volunteers. So communication tools helping turn red lights green, allow the speaker to actually discover, and this is exactly what Kayla said, and say what they're thinking, right? She came to it on her own. She discovered and she got there on her own without me needing, or without Morgan needing to do that for her. Help the speaker feel safe and thus more open to change. Again, kind of what Morgan was commenting on, like our facial reactions, our comments, our sighs, our holding our breath, all of that, right, can really just communicate to somebody, I'm not comfortable listening right now. Increase the connection. Again, this connection is your key, your connection to your child. I do not recommend that you disconnect from them unless for some reason that's, essential for your self-care. I don't want to, tell you that, but like, but that this connection with your child is incredibly, incredibly important. Compassion, hope for change. Again, part of our mission here to reduce the shame and stigma associated with substance use problems, and allowing people to be open about stumbling and to keep learning. As I acknowledged, we all make mistakes at this. This is hard. And we're just going to keep trying, Hope is an important part of the mission of the foundation. So you don't have to know the answers, which is great, right? Sometimes as parents or as like professionals, we feel like we need to know the answers. We don't need to know the answers. Sometimes all we need, and all someone else needs, is someone to listen. Okay, again, feel free to chat any questions. We are going to switch over to the love skills. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. So the L in love is listening, and that is then broken down into the oars. So, so don't get too wrapped up in the acronyms, but within the L are these 4 different skills that we're going to talk about now: the open-ended questions, the affirmations, reflective listening, and summaries. And these, I just mentioned motivational interviewing. All of these skills come out of motivational interviewing. So these are great skills. I talk about them with parents all the time. And one interesting question came up in the other night. Someone was talking about, young adults and how even if they ask an open-ended question, they can still get a one-word answer. And it's totally possible. So none of these are magic buttons, but they are all skills that help to strengthen the connection and the communication with your child. And some of them are just planting seeds. So you have another handout, I believe, in your packet. But again, we're going to go over a lot of this here. So if you don't have it, don't worry. We're going to first here quick make a note on the closed questions, or before we talk about the open questions, we're going to talk briefly here and give some examples about what closed questions are. Because if we're listening, we can hear, are we asking an open question or are we asking a closed question? So we want to listen to what we're communicating as well. So, oops, sorry about that. So the problems with closed questions, they invite a short answer, not only yes or no. Is your son actively using now? Well, that doesn't give us much information, right? The yes, they're using, no, they're not using. And we'll talk, I'm going to try not to jump ahead. We're going to talk about how to turn closed questions into open questions in a minute, because that's always a fun skill to do. And when I first learned this skill, I found that I was asking so many closed questions and really closing that door to communication. And once you catch it, you're like, oh, okay, wait, let me try to do more of this. Closed questions ask for specific information. So again, like the one above, they don't encourage more. Hang on a second, my pictures are in my way here. They ask for specific information and don't encourage more. So you're not getting any kind of elaboration when you use a closed question. You're just getting a simple answer. How long have they used cocaine? Well, I mean, it could be someone who's used cocaine for 10 years, but maybe they've used it a couple times a year. Or maybe they used cocaine for the last 10 years and have been hospitalized 3 times for heart conditions and, like nearing a heart attack, and they have a drunk driving right? So these are 2 very different situations. And so by asking how long someone's used, which is a closed question, we don't really get much information. They sometimes restrict to multiple choice. What do you plan to improve? What do you plan to do to improve your self-care today, tomorrow, or next week? Right? So that just gives you 3 choices. Well, what if I don't want to improve it until like the spring? What does that mean, right? Or what if I don't know and I haven't thought that all out yet? Like that's forcing me to give an answer that maybe that's not where I am in my change process. And they limit the answer options. Don't you want to change? Well, that's not really a yes or no question, right? I find myself really wanting to make these open right away, but an example of an open question might be, what might be some of the benefits about changing? What might be some of the hard things about changing, right? And so that allows the ambivalence to be there, and that's a very different question than don't you want to change? And I can understand how anyone would get to that question, don't you want to change, when they're feeling scared and they're feeling worried about their loved one. But again, we really just want to keep these lines of communication open. So open-ended questions that call for elaboration and are less likely to be answered with one word, yes or no. So for example, what concerns you the most? What would you like to be different? They invite a description, giving you more to listen to and learn from. So you want to really open up that conversation and bring in and welcome all of the nuance. They set a collaborative tone as they communicate more interest in the other person's point of view. So some of those closed questions, you could hear the judgment in there, you could hear the impatience in there, you could hear the frustration in there. And when we're talking about communication, what we're really trying to do is to get the other person to open up with us here. We want our loved one to open up to us. Okay, so I always find this really fun. So the way you ask a question can move things forward in your communication, or it can cause things to stop. So again, these red lights and green lights. And I'm going to encourage you to use the chat here if you feel comfortable. So, did you drink last night versus, anyone want to offer an open question in response to that? Ooh, I see a chat. What does your drinking look like in the last 24 hours? Terrific. Okay, so what's been going on with drinking in the last 24 hours? Excellent. That's a very similar question to what I might ask somebody when they come in for session, right? Like, so how's your substance use gone this week? Exactly. So what does it look like? Very nice open question there. Terrific. Don't you want to change? And I gave some examples for this one last time, but any other examples of don't you want to change? What we might say. I welcome you all to take risks, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Helps me grow. And let's see what we got here. What is your drinking? Okay. How do you feel about the idea of changing this behavior? Wow. Right. How do you feel about it? Wow. I know that if I'm trying to change a behavior, I might feel excited. I might feel scared. I might feel afraid that I can't do it. I might feel angry that I have to, right? And how nice it would be to know that someone is actually thinking about those things for me. Haven't you ever thought about trying? Let's see, we got one more here. What does change look like for you? Great, great. If you were to change this, what would it look like? That's a terrific open-ended question, right? And my vision, this has been, something even as a professional that I think I really need to think about. My vision for someone's life might be, right? So what does that look like? What does it look like for you to change? What do you imagine that would be like? And it's wonderful when we hear from people something that we never would have expected. Haven't you thought about trying rehab? Haven't you thought about trying meetings? Haven't you thought about trying Vivitrol versus how can we open that up? What have you tried? What has been helpful? What we got here in our chat? What are some of the things you've considered, right? Trying to change this behavior. Right, because I think, many people, when they're trying to change a behavior, they've already tried a bunch of stuff and it hasn't worked, but we really want to validate all that work and effort that they've put into it up until this point. And I think it allows us as the loved one to really see, I hear this from parents all the time, like when they can get in touch with how hard their loved one has been working, whether they've been successful or not, at trying to change a behavior, and many failed attempts sometimes, it just really shifts the conversation into something that's much more compassionate. Okay, so there's some examples. I think you all did a great job. Okay, I love this little cartoon. I think I have it sometimes. It's a special hearing aid. It filters out criticism and amplifies compliments, right? So back to the idea that to really use reinforcement, we all respond better to reinforcement. And if we're feeling criticized, and closed questions can easily do that, if we're feeling criticized, then we shut down. Red lights, conversation's done, we're not going to get anywhere. But if we can keep a collaborative, curious conversation going, there's much greater likelihood that our loved one is going to hear us and be willing to engage in discussion. Okay, so that is the O of our OARS skills, open-ended questions. And the A, this is one of my favorites because I just think it feels so good as the giver. They all do, but affirmations, right? One of the little shortcuts that we use to affirmations that I talk about with parents, catch them being good. I just had a 12:30 session with a family today. And this is what we talked about, catch them being good, and it was a very little behavior. And I think that when our kids are struggling with substance use issues or our partner, it's the tone of the conversation can get very negative because there can be a lot of stuff that's going wrong. And that's true. And also our brains just have a negative bias by nature. It's unfortunate that nature designed us that way, but it did. And so we have to really practice rewiring our brains to find the good and to find the positive. And I think that that's especially true in families where there's substance use happening. And so whatever it is, you really want to acknowledge, we know that reinforcement increases behavior. So if reinforcement is letting someone know, giving them a compliment, giving them praise, and I'll hear parents say, why should I praise them for picking up their laundry? They're supposed to do that anyway. And my answer is because you want them to keep picking up their laundry. And the more that you tell them that you appreciate it, and this doesn't have to be every time, right? But especially when the tone of the conversation has been so negative, we really want to catch them being good. We really want to make sure they know that we're recognizing the effort. And again, I have an adolescent and I have a tween, and I find that with my adolescent son, he really doesn't want to hear it. He's like, no, don't say that, don't say that. But I know that there's somewhere in him that he really does, and that's going in a little pocket someplace that he's going to hold on to that and hopefully draw on it a little bit later if he's not feeling confident, or if he's feeling guilty about something or feeling shame about something, that there's this other moment that he can draw on where he feels good about something that he did. So again, positive acknowledgement increases positive behavior. So it's easier to increase positive behavior than it is to decrease negative behavior. So we, in effect, can decrease the behaviors that we don't want by increasing the behaviors that we want. A lack of acknowledgement, this is really important. So if we don't recognize and acknowledge the positive behaviors, they're less likely to continue happening. So reinforcement, and once a behavior becomes a habit, it doesn't require all of that reinforcement. But as we're trying to create new behaviors, if it's not being reinforced, the behavior is not going to stick around. So it's really, really important. And I would even say, like, it's kind of detrimental to not do it, because if the person doesn't feel like the behavior really matters and it's an effort for them, why are they going to continue, right? Gosh, I really appreciate that you got home at midnight last night. I slept so much better. Thank you. Or it was so nice to see your face when you, great job getting your homework done. How does that feel to you to be done on time? Whatever it is, right? So we want to really just let people know that we're catching them being good. And there's a great study about marriages, and I think it's that like 5 compliments a day or something like that, or like 5 nice things a day is one of the variables that's associated with positive outcomes in marriage. So again, this stuff works not only here, but you can apply it to other relationships as well. And then affirm yourselves. So affirmations make both people feel better. So I feel good when I say something loving to you, and you feel good when you hear it. And it has to be genuine and authentic, and it has to really come from a place that you mean it. Got to be specific. You're affirming the behavior, and over general cheerleading just falls flat, right? So, oh, you're such a great person. You're working so hard. Like, that's not as effective as saying, gosh, I really see all that time that you put into studying last night. That was really impressive. Or, thank you so much for like helping me clean up after dinner. It meant a lot to me to feel like we were a team. Versus, I appreciate your help is more generous, right? But targeting the specific behavior. So when listening, using affirmations acknowledges struggles or difficulties. I know thinking about this is stressful for you, right? So it can be a way to affirm is to acknowledge how hard something might be for someone. We can affirm successes. It's great to see that you finished the program. Skills and or strengths. You're really good at, you're really good, I'm thinking of, I don't know, so many things I can think of here, but you're really good at being a helper. You're really good at taking care of your little sister. You're really good at guitar. You're really good at, doing all kinds of things, your job. Noticing positive actions, so catch them being good. I like the way you said that. That was this is one I use with my kids too. Gosh, I really like the way that you said that to your sister. That was really sweet. And I like that. Goals and values, your love for your kids is obvious, right? As parents, sometimes we can feel like we're not doing a very good job. And if someone's value is to be a good parent, right? Like, I can see that in you. I can see that you're doing that. We can also affirm hope, caring, and support. I really care about you and hope I can help. Okay. So again, one of the slides you'll see repeated throughout this training. We want to practice, practice, practice. Again, if the tone of the conversation for a while has been pretty negative, it's going to feel uncomfortable and different for people. So we want to make sure that we practice this skill of affirming. So in your packet, you should have, and again, it's the same thing, I believe, is up here. Yes. So it's in your packet, and then it's also up here on the screen. So write down 2 affirmations for the following statement. I'm sick of this. Everything just keeps getting messed up. I tried, hang on a second, I have to move my pictures. I tried to go see my teacher to get help on my test, and he didn't show up for office hours, and now it's like it's my fault I failed the test. And no one seems to care that I'm doing well in my other classes. What's the point in even trying? I just want to hang out with my friends, but they're all talking about their college applications, and I'm probably not smart enough to get into college anyway. I'm so messed up because if I fail this class, I'm not allowed to be on the soccer team anymore. And that's the only thing I even like these days. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about and maybe to jot down a couple affirmations. And then if you would like, you can place those in the chat. Okay. Any examples of affirmations that people would like to share? It's great to see you reached out to your teacher. Absolutely. I was thinking that too, right? Like, what a bummer for this kid that they probably tried something different and it didn't work, right? So great to see that you did that you reached out. That shows a really impressive effort to overcome the difficulties that you had in that class, right? So really validating like how hard that class was and the effort that they put in to overcome it. Terrific. Anything else that people thought here? Sounds like you're really trying in school. Soccer matters so much to you, and you've been working really hard at it. And see how much you care. Okay, wonderful. So, I encourage you all. That shows a really impressive effort to overcome the difficulties you had in that class. Right? I know how smart you are, and it's really hard to not feel that way, right? Like, oh, what a hard example that you had to not feel that way. Terrific. Great. Really good examples, everybody. Thank you. And I encourage you, practice it. Do one affirmation today, one to somebody else and one to yourself, and just notice how it feels to give it to receive it yourself. So important. Okay. So moving along here, that was the A of our OR skills. And again, the affirmations falls under listening because we're listening to what someone's saying, and what we're giving back is something kind of positive to them. Okay, so reflections. Step one, so let's see, this is our first slide on reflections here. Okay, oops, sorry folks. Okay, affirmations, reflections. Okay, so the R of the OR skills, the reflections, first step one, in order to reflect something back to someone, we have to listen, slow down, and let yourself hear what the other person's saying, okay? So this is why we practiced the listening skill before we got to reflections. We practiced that simply listening, because in order to be able to reflect back to what someone's saying, we need to know what they're saying, okay? So slow down, let yourself hear what the other person's saying. And step two, try to say it back exactly with no changes. I find that my own natural instinct, and often when I do this in the training, my natural instinct is to say, it sounds like you're saying, you don't need to do that. Just reflect it right back. Reflect back exactly what you're hearing. So try to say it back exactly, no changes. You're not fixing it. You're not telling them your thing. You're not judging it. You're just simply handing back to them exactly what they said to you. And then after that, you check back just to see, did I get that right? Am I hearing what you said? So there's a difference between being listened to and being heard. So there's no penalty for missing. In fact, it gives you more information and a better understanding. Reflections let them know that you are actually listening. It's amazing to be heard. So we can see here in this image of this sweet little polar bear that, the reflection is an exact mirror of the polar bear themselves. So we have two kinds of reflections we're going to talk about: simple reflections and double-sided reflections. So if we go with this idea that a reflection is just giving back to someone what they just said to us. Your child says, I'm going to fail this test either way, since the teacher hates me, so who cares if I study? It makes me want to go smoke instead. A reflection of that. You think you're going to fail the test, which makes you not want to study and to smoke instead. Right? And if we were going to go with that idea of then checking back in, we could say, did I get that right? And they might say, no, it's not that I think I'm going to fail the test. It's actually that, they do say that, right? But they might sort of change, say, no, it's actually this. And that's where they're saying, don't worry if you get it wrong. It's okay if you got it wrong. You don't need to do this perfectly. What that getting it wrong does is it allows the person to tweak it a little bit and to give you a more accurate explanation as to what they're feeling. The child, I really want to hang out with my friends tonight. Before I flip to the next slide, anyone want to give it a try? I'll check back up in the chat and see if anyone said anything. But you really miss your friends, and you think hanging out with them is risky for you. Oops, did I jump ahead? Sorry about that, folks. I do that sometimes. Okay, I know all my friends are partying tonight, but I'm bored and I really want to hang out with them. I don't know what to do. Yes, okay. You really miss your friends, and you think hanging out with them is risky for you. I'll say that both of these examples, I think in the examples here, they actually change it a little more than I might suggest, just staying a little closer to your child's words, their own words. This one, I think, I think just the word missing them, it's making an interpretation. I think it's okay, and again, if it's wrong, then they'll correct you. But I would say you could probably stay a little closer to the actual wording than is offered here. But we don't want to add anything. We don't want to make assumptions. We don't want to make judgments. And this one is called a double-sided reflection because this is someone who's ambivalent, right? They want to do two things. They want to hang out with their friends, and they also know that their friends are going to be partying. So it sounds like someone who might be working on trying to make some change around their substance use. And so in a double-sided reflection, we are validating and reflecting back both sides of the person's experience, right? And that both of those two things can be true at the same time. It doesn't have to be just one. It doesn't have to be that either I want to hang out with my friends or I want to be abstinent, that both of those things can exist at the same time. Okay. So we've gotten through our O, our A, and our R of our listening ORS skills from motivational interviewing. And we are now going to move on to summaries. And so this image here, we use this little bouquet of flowers. So we think about this as she's gathering together all of the different elements of a communication. And she's bringing them together into a mega reflection. So a summary is just a reflection where you are reflecting back a lot of different points that someone may have made. And it might be you're doing it because you're shifting on to a new topic. It also might be doing it because you just want this person to know that you're hearing them. And sometimes you'll find that you summarize, and that what happens is that the person says something like, yeah, can you believe it? And blah, 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 blah. And then they just keep going and going, right? So that it's that pause to recognize and to acknowledge, I hear you. I heard all of those things. And they might say, no, like that, those couple parts were true, but this part is actually not that, it's this. And it's like, oh, okay, I better understand. Is this more accurate? Yes, that's more accurate. So it's usually used at the end or somewhere, in the middle of a conversation to kind of gather a bunch of pieces of information together. Oops, jumped ahead. So when someone gives you a lot of information, you can respond by summarizing what they've said. It's a collection of reflections. It can involve paraphrasing. So while with the reflections, we said that we really wanted to keep it as close to the person's wording as possible. With a summary, we can absolutely paraphrase, and we'll need to because someone may have been talking for quite a while, and so it's not actually realistic to kind of feed back their exact words, so we're paraphrasing with these. It can be a helpful and sensitive way to move on in the conversation. So if you feel like maybe you've kind of hit your max in terms of like being able to engage around a certain part of the conversation, this can be a way to just kind of close it out and move on. I will say that I've had that backfire on me at times where I will summarize and it will then open somebody up. So I would be, I'd be cautious in assuming that it's going to move the conversation on, but it has that capacity to do that. And it helps people feel heard, if you've just kind of shared a whole bunch of stuff about everything that's been going on for you this week, or how hard it's been to change your drug use, or what problems that you're having in your marriage, and someone thoughtfully picks up all of the flowers in that conversation and reflects back to you that they've heard each dimension, that leaves someone feeling very tended to. So here's an example. Let me summarize what you've told me so far. You said you might want to change because you were blank, and it scared you when blank. Then you mentioned blank, and now blank, right? So you can see here in the summary, and if I were to fill it in, let me summarize what you've told me so far. You said you might want to change because you're noticing that your short-term memory is going a little bit, and it scared you when you were talking to your boss and you couldn't find that word that you were looking for, and you recognize that that's connected to smoking pot, and then you mentioned that you've actually not had as much energy, and now you're spending too much money on it. So all of those things, right? So that's an example of maybe summarizing like several different things that someone just told you and how they might feel understood and like you're really paying attention. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the listening skills. And again, the listening skills are the L of love. And within the L of love, we have the OR skills, the open-ended questions, the affirmations, the reflections, and the summaries. So a lot of stuff in there. You can listen to this video over and over and listen to just a 5-minute chunk at a time to pick up each individual skill. But so before we move on to the O in love, does anybody have any questions? So the offering information is this is one that I think, again, people get excited about this one because we all love to give information. And the truth is we probably have a lot of good information. The problem is that a lot of times people don't want our information. Or they might want it, but they feel like it's been forced upon them. And they've not been given the opportunity to really consent to receiving that information. And so what we're going to talk about today is the information sandwich. So we've got our little sandwich here, and the different components of the sandwich. And in this picture, he's holding up the sign, the red light, saying, no, I don't want the information sandwich. And we'll talk about, again, that means stop. But how do we get him to hold up that green sign? How do we get a green light to go ahead with offering information? And sometimes we won't, right? But how do we increase the chances that we might? Give it to me straight, Doc. How long do I have before to ignore your advice? So this is a well-known fact in behavioral medicine, especially documented in areas where doctors are asking people to make behavioral changes, such as stopping smoking or cutting out sugar or anything else. When people are being asked to make changes, the way that we deliver it is so important, and that most people, when given unsolicited advice, are not going to take it, right? Like there might be a part of them that kind of goes, yeah, I get that, that's right, that makes sense. But just as humans, we're not really wired to absorb information when it's given to us in what might feel like a forced upon way. So asking permission. So this is the first part of the sandwich. It looks like in the picture here, they refer to it as the top bun. I often think about it as the bottom bun. So you can pick whichever piece of bread or the bagel or whatever works for you. For me, I think about it as the bottom bun because it really feels like the foundation and the starting point. And without it, you don't really go anywhere. So asking permission is the first piece of the information sandwich. So this is the knocking on the door before you enter the top of the sandwich. Okay. So what you accomplish by asking permission, it allows the other to invite you in, which is a fundamental shift in terms of motivation. People are much more motivated if they've consented to being given advice. It increases their involvement. So we talked about that idea of conversations being collaborative rather than one-sided. It honors and reinforces their other's autonomy. In my experience, when I say to someone, clinically, can I give you some feedback? It's almost never the case that someone says no. But if they do, it's my responsibility to honor that. And, it can be different with my own family than it is clinically, but just that idea that like, it really respects that someone else does have the ability to say, no, I actually don't want that right now. It's the spirit of collaboration that we talk about as being so important in the invitation to change. And it also increases the likelihood that the information will be heard, right? So if we're giving someone advice and they've got the red light on, they're not going to hear it. It's not going to be helpful, and it's going to do damage to the relationship. So we need to sit with the discomfort of no, if that's what we're told, and if we're told yes, that's okay, I'm open to it, then that tells us that it's a green light. And then we need to think about, once I've got that green light, what do I do with it? So examples of asking permission or knocking on the door, would it be helpful for you to hear about, about my recommendations for extra support for you? Could I offer you a thought? Can I ask a question? Would you like to hear what some other parents have done? Would it be all right if I expressed one concern I have about this plan? I have a couple ideas, but did you want to tell me your thought about this first? So these are all ways or examples, and I really encourage you, again, practice, practice, practice. You will find your own words, your own language, what feels most natural to you, and I just encourage you to just practice the skill because it will become more natural. And in the meantime, use any of these. Okay, so the middle of the sandwich, so this is, in this case, the meat, or it could be a meat alternative, and some lettuce and tomato and cheese there. Can be whatever you'd like inside your sandwich. So what information is being offered? Different kinds of information that we might want to be offering to somebody. We might want to offer feedback. We might want to offer information about anything, or we may want to share something about our own experience that we feel might be helpful for them, but they might not be interested in our experience. So once we've got that green light, though, these are the different kinds of things that we might use this skill for. So how to offer it. We're going to provide options and paths. We're going to put it in the context of other parents' experience. Information is offered. So again, this invitation to change. I can't tell you, I've been working with the foundation for a long time. Took us a while to come up with the name of the model of the invitation to change, but it was the perfect place to land on because it is absolutely an invitation, and that is the spirit of all communication. So we are offering and not imposing any kind of information that we're giving. And we can also allow them to disagree, right? Someone may not like our information. Just because we got the green light on, yes, you can tell me, it doesn't mean that once we offer the information, they're going to want it, right? I might say to somebody, can I give you some thoughts on what my experience is right now? Like, I actually think you need probably a higher level of care. You might need to do intensive outpatient program, maybe even rehab. And their answer might be, I am absolutely not interested in that. And that's okay. That's okay. So just, to be aware that one green light does not mean that, that the rest from there is going to be green lights as well. But the spirit does make it more likely that they'll be open to your advice. Okay, and then the bottom of the sandwich, or again, again, I just flipped my sandwich. The last step is a question, and this is sort of like what we did with the reflections a little bit. The last step is a question to clarify the information that was just discussed. So just want to check back in about how you heard what I was saying, or I wasn't sure that I said that very clearly. Does that make sense to you? Was it delivered in a way that was acceptable to them? Could they hear it emotionally? Did it make sense to them? So we're not just spewing information out at someone, but letting them know that once I've done this, I care about how that landed with you. I care about whether that resonated, or whether you were offended or appalled or angry or felt incredibly loved. I want to know how that landed with you, right? So this opportunity to really offer information, we really want to have these three parts. The first part, asking permission. The second part, delivering the information. And the third part, checking back in, seeing how it landed. Okay, so that is the O of the love skills, offering information, or the information sandwich. Any questions on that before we move on? Can all these tools be used with dealing with adults? To significant others struggling with substance use as well? Kimberly, absolutely. That is such a great question. So when I do these, and I think it can be used with colleagues, I think it can be used with friendships. I think this can be used all over the place. And I really try to just say our loved ones or our child or our partner, but it really is applicable in all kinds of situations. And, in a management position, it can be helpful. Like there's so many different places where communication skills are just a part of life. And a lot of us never really learned them, right? We didn't learn how to communicate in these ways. And so, yes, absolutely. This is not specific to just, and some of the research comes out of other areas besides just psychology research too. So, great question. And in some ways, I think with partners, this idea of the information sandwich is so important because, to get into what feels like a parent-child dynamic with a partner, right? Because we're giving them advice, we're telling them what to do, we're telling them how to solve their problems. That can really be very triggering for people. And there's something incredibly respectful about first asking if someone wants your advice. And honestly, the first time you do it, sometimes the person's like, well, yeah, I guess. They're kind of caught off guard by it because it really can be a new behavior to practice. But over time, people come to really, really appreciate it. And we have two different versions of some skills handouts that we use, and they're parents and partner, but they're almost identical. The only difference is like the examples might be, my wife did this or my husband did that, or, versus my child did this. And so the context may be different and the person, but the skills are the same. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so V and E go together here. And validating and empathizing are very important skills. Genuinely and compassionately acknowledging another person's experience without needing to qualify it in any way, and understanding the other person's perspective. So validation, your acknowledgement that what they are going through, thinking, feeling, how they behaved is real to them. One of the other sessions in this training is about behaviors making sense, and that people do the things they do for a reason, even if it doesn't appear on the surface to make sense to us. We can be assured that there is a reason that they're doing it that makes sense to them. Excuse me. Just acknowledging that what they're thinking, feeling, and behaving is real can be very, very powerful to people. And especially when there's substance use in the picture, because people are doing things that might not feel like they make sense to you. They feel like they make sense to the individual, but if you can be validating to them, that can go a really long way to changing the conversation. Empathy is actually seeing it from their perspective, walking in their shoes. So, an important caveat here, you don't have to agree with them, but to have the willingness to just step into somebody else's shoes, to be aware and sitting with what their experience might be. Accurate empathy is critical. It's a powerful predictor of positive outcome in therapy research. So when you look at therapists' ability to be empathic and accurately empathic, we see better outcomes in psychotherapy. And I will just say that the same is true with our loved ones. Okay, so now we're going to talk for a minute about combining the love elements. And, okay, so in this example, here's the child. I'm going to fail this test either way since the teacher hates me. So who cares if I study? It makes me want to go smoke instead. So first of all, the parent reflecting back, you think you're going to fail your test, which makes you not want to study and to smoke instead. Reflection. Validating. I get how hard it is to stay motivated when you feel so discouraged. I get how hard it is to stay motivated when you feel so discouraged. I really appreciate you letting me know what's going on with you. Example of an affirmation. Offering. Would it be okay for me to offer an idea about this? So one of the things I like about this slide is that it shows that, communication is just as much of an art as it is a science, that there's so many different ways that we can respond and be skillful with our loved ones. And again, parents, partners, children, coworkers, and that when we do this, it's going to lead the conversation in a different direction. But regardless of what direction it's leading us in, if we're using one of these communication skills, we are strengthening the relationship. We are increasing the likelihood that our loved one is going to want to continue talking to us, especially about the hard stuff, and that we have the opportunity in that conversation to support their change. Okay, so before we move on to one other skill, are there any questions? Okay. All right, so this last skill is a skill for what we're referring to here as inviting behavior, because again, we're sticking within that model of an invitation. We used to refer this more as making a request. So if that's like easier language for you to understand, if I want to make a request of my loved one, how do I do that in a way that's effective? How do I do that in a way that increases the likelihood that I'm going to get what I need? And this is the model for that, that skill. And we refer to it as SURF. Be specific, offer an understanding statement, take partial responsibility, and label your feelings. So be specific. Focus on the behavior that you want to invite. And we're going to talk about all these a little bit more in detail in the next few slides. So focus on the behavior, right? So if you say something like, I want you to be nicer. I want you to be more helpful. I want you to be something else like that. It's not really easy for the person to be able to know exactly what it is that you're asking for. So you really want to focus on the behavior to invite and avoid being general. Offer an understanding statement. So try to see it from their eyes. Validate, empathize, reflect. Take partial responsibility. Collaborate by sharing in the problem, right? So any problem that's happening in a family is not just an example of one particular person. It's probably some dynamic in part. And so kind of taking responsibility for your part. And labeling your feelings, using self-awareness to notice and describe an emotional impact on you. So in addition to the ingredients of surfing, how you surf matters too. So I'm thinking of one particular situation where there's someone who tends to always ask for something that they need from their partner at like 10:30 at night. And, you know, after everybody, you know, like they've had dealt with the kids and their jobs and their this and their that. And it's like, you know, one of the things that we've really been working on is, can we try to find a different time of day to have that conversation, right? Because I know at 10:30 at night, I'm not really interested in having a conversation about something that someone wants me to change. And so really being thoughtful that the person that you are making a request of is in a place where they can hear you and where you are able to communicate from a place of patience and respect, and you know that you've had lunch and sleep and all those other kind of things, so that you're going to be more likely to use these skills if you're in a good place and you're not highly emotional. So if you are highly emotional, hold off and come back to it later. The tone. So how we say something matters as much as what we say. Kind of reminds me of that earlier slide where we talked about, don't you want to change? Like, I mean, that could be said in so many different ways. Even though it's a closed question, we could say it softer, we could say it more attacking, we could say it. So we really want to be mindful and aware of our tone. Practice ahead of time. I'll do this in session with people all the time. If they want to make a request of someone, let's write it out. Have you role play it with me? So let's go over it together. Let me tell you how I feel when I hear you asking that of me. Let me tell you about what my reactions are. So use the people around you. Use your partner if you're talking to your child. Use a friend if you're talking to your partner. Use a therapist. You know, use someone that you can trust to practice. You're more likely to communicate effectively if you practice before you get into that situation where you're just going to feel more emotional than maybe you would in a practice session. Start small. If there's a lot that you want to ask of your child, you know, don't ask them to change, or your partner, don't ask them to change everything at once. Try the low-hanging fruit first, right? Like if there's something that feels a little bit more accessible or a little bit maybe easier for them to accomplish, start there and build upon that success and build upon that skill that you've created by being able to ask for things without, going for the big one first. Just more likely to have success, and you're more likely to feel confident in your ability to ask for something and to be heard if you start with something that's easier, and then you want to work your way up to the harder stuff. So inviting positive behavior. So again, this is about like making requests about things we'd like to see from other people. Communication is an important way to highlight how you will respond to a specific behavior. Stating behavior when it occurs can increase motivation and support the change process. It directly invites the behaviors you want to support so they can be strengthened or reinforced. It does not guarantee a response, but increases the chances a behavior will occur. So, for example, maybe the request is, I'm happy to let you use the car. When you do, it's really important to me that you have it home by midnight. And, I would really appreciate it if that's something that you could do. So when your child then brings the car home at 12, thank you so much. It was so helpful that I really appreciate the fact that you responded to that. And it also says here, so and if it's not going to happen, you need to kind of talk ahead about what is going to be the outcome if that behavior doesn't happen. So you just want to think that through in advance, not after the fact. So it does not guarantee a response, but it increases the chances that a behavior will occur. So if they don't know what it is that you want from them, then they're not actually able to do it. So we have to be really clear and specific about what we're asking for. And it promotes a mindful pause button, responding on your part, rather than unhelpful emotionary reacting or responding, right? So instead of, the car gets home again at 2:00 in the morning and you're mad and you're yelling, it's that you've now planned ahead for something that really matters to you. And so you can actually work with that specific behavior rather than exploding every time or, withdrawing and not doing anything about it at all. It gives you a framework to work from. Okay, again, and practice. This stuff is hard, and it doesn't necessarily come natural to a lot of us, and it especially doesn't come natural in situations where there's substance use. It can really feel against the grain, but these skills are based in research. So we are going to look at an example here. So using the 4 ingredients of SURF. And let me see if you have this in your, yes, you do. So you have this in your exercises. So if you have those, you can take that out. If not, you can just look at it later. Okay. John is the father to 22-year-old Jennifer, who recently moved back home after graduating from college and trying to find a job. John worries about Jennifer, saying she hasn't been acting like herself, staying out with her friends several times per week, sometimes drinking, sleeping in the afternoons, and having no interest in finding work. He has been putting in a lot of overtime at work and has not been home as much as he would like. He wants to talk to her about looking for work, but every time he tries, the conversation ends in yelling. Okay, so now I want to take a few minutes to think about scripting a conversation with the SURF tools that invites the positive behavior of completing the job applications. So let me just scroll back. Oh, I guess you won't all have that. So just so that we can review briefly here. So we want to SURF skills, we want to be specific. So you want to ask for something very specific. Offer an understanding statement, so why you understand their experience, right? So why we might understand this child's struggle. Take partial responsibility, so how can I help you solve the problem? How have I been a part of getting us to this point where We're having this problem, and labeling your feelings. Notice what's coming up for you. Okay, S, U, R, and F. So take a few minutes and think about that. Linda, I guess I prioritize everyone's safety and would empathize when unplanned events or beyond child's control occur during outings at night. Sure. Sure. Makes a lot of sense. All right. So feel free to pop anything into the chat that you came up with. But here's our communication that was crafted. And again, this is something that you can write ahead of time. If you know that your child or your loved one is struggling in some way, you can craft something like this ahead of time, draft it out. Jennifer, I know that it hasn't been easy for you since you came back from school. I also know that I've been working a lot, so it may not seem like I'm available to help. I'm concerned that you have a lot of downtime and will need spending money. I would like you to start looking for work. In fact, if you complete applications during the week, I'm willing to give you the car on the days you apply to use for the whole day. What are your thoughts? Okay, so here we have it broken down. So I know that it hasn't been easy for you since you came back from school. So that's that idea of stepping into the other person's shoes, understanding that she's not just blowing this off, she doesn't care, she's actually having a hard time. It's been hard for her since she's been home from school. I also know that I've been working a lot, so it may not seem like I'm available to help, right? So I understand that I'm playing a role in this and that I have not been as available as I would like to be. I'm concerned that you have a lot of downtime and will need spending money, right? So I'm expressing my feelings. I'm not telling her what she, in that moment, I'm not telling her what she needs to do. And I'm actually never telling her what she needs to do. I'm making a request of her. But I'm first identifying what it is that I'm feeling here. I'm feeling concerned. I would like you to start looking for work. So there's the request. There's that invitation. In fact, if you complete applications during the week, so specifically what I want, right? And I love this one because we can't ask somebody to get a job, right? Well, we can ask them to get applications, to put in applications. We can ask them to apply for a job. And I guess if there's no time more than now to recognize that that can be something that's outside of our control, but something that she does have control over is filling out those applications. And if you complete the applications, I'm willing to give you the car on days that you apply. And so I like this one, that this is also a little bit of responsibility in here too. It's not the responsibility that I took in creating the problem. It's the responsibility that I'm taking with you in solving the problem. So I'm going to give you the car, not only to go on those interviews if you have them, but also just you can use it for the day. If you apply, I'm going to give you something for that. And to use for the whole day. What are your thoughts? So that's this idea of an invitation, checking back in, seeing how it landed. I mean, Jennifer might say, no, I actually don't really care about having the car, but what I really need is it's getting cold out and I really want to start knitting again. I would just love to get a bunch of yarn and some new supplies, and I don't have any cash. Like, could we go to the craft store and pick some stuff up, right? So awesome, right? You have the opportunity there to hear back. Or you might hear, gosh, I have no idea how even to get started with these applications. Everything is online these days and I'm so overwhelmed and confused by it, and I just can't figure out how to use Indeed or any of these apps, and I need someone to help me. Is there a time when you're available? So this gives us more information. Okay, so that actually it brings us to the end of the search skills. So if I knew I had another 15 minutes, I would have expanded more. So let me open it up to any questions that anybody has. It's always a balancing act of pacing, wanting to get through all of the material while also wanting to honor the time and engage conversations. So what kind of items might people have some questions about? And while you're thinking about that, I will just go over a few different options and resources here. So 5 tools parents can use to help their children and themselves by Josh Kang. Josh is one of our psychologists at the CMC Foundation for Change, so that's a great reading. And all of this stuff can be found here on our website. So the CMC Foundation for Change.org/CWC Family Training. And let me see if I can, no, I can't really make my screen bigger when I'm sharing, but so you can see there's lots of tabs. Go to the CMC Foundation website, click around. We love putting stuff up on the website, giving it away, letting people have access to it. So, lots of good things there that you can read. What Chamu taught me about a happy marriage. So this is a great example of someone using these behavioral principles around communication in their marriage. And again, there's so much couples work that is based in these communication tools. So I encourage you to go, and it's a really beautiful article. Confrontation in addiction treatment. So there's a link to that article as well. And that just really shows this idea of confronting people, and you have to break down the denial and really tell them all the terrible things that are happening, that has actually been shown in the research to negatively impact motivation. And that's not to say, like, if you've done that, then, oh my gosh, you should feel terrible about it. Don't. Like, it's totally what's out there and what everyone is kind of, many people have been taught is like what needs to happen. We're just inviting you all in to consider the alternative and to really understand, while well-intended and while that might actually work with certain people, the research indicates that it's problematic and that it negatively impacts motivation. And that's written by Bill Miller and William White. And Bill Miller is one of the founders of motivational interviewing. And another reading here, how to make sense out of irrational behavior. So one of our little sayings is that behavior makes sense. And this link here helps us to think about how we can make sense of our loved ones' behaviors that can seem so illogical, to make no sense, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so a couple things here. So questions from the earlier love section. Tips for balancing the desire to be heard in those conversations. Sometimes the active listening and empathy feels intuitive, but then it can be hard to leave it there and not talk about your feelings or ways or the behavior shared. Yes, absolutely, right? So our job is not only to listen. Our job is also to, express our feelings, and that there is time for that. And I like to think about that in terms of the red light, green lights, and also the idea of asking permission and maybe making it a separate conversation. Unless you get the sense that it's welcome in that moment, right? So maybe you ask a question for permission. So yeah, gosh, I hear all that. And you've been listening, and you might say, like, so I'm wondering if you're open to hearing like some of what my feelings have been about all this. And they might say yes, they might say no, they might say yes, but be kind of sheepish, and you might want to just be curious about that. And, or you might want to make it a completely separate conversation, right? Because if you've had like a really nice conversation where you're listening, then you might not want to kind of change that. But so I don't think there's a perfect answer. I think you have to kind of use your intuition and probably make some mistakes along the way. And just trust that, again, if it's in this context of like really good communication, then whatever we do is it's gonna work out in the wash. I think that's a terrific question. But asking permission, maybe making it a separate conversation, and listening for the red lights and the green lights are all things that I would do. And a lot of self-compassion, which again is what we did last week, and validating yourself. And maybe figuring out, like, are these feelings that I need validation from this person, or can I get validation about these feelings from someplace else? So that's maybe a nuanced question to use there as well. Okay, so from the earlier or section, okay, that's the one we just did. And using these tools are not natural form of communication. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Each of my children respond to different forms of communication. Totally true. And then the partner can be another form. One daughter is so intrinsically motivated, she would hate me to use these strategies and just wants me to spend time with her. My son has been evolving and using and crossing over between young adulthood and independence, helping him recognize what works for him, helps him identify what he can control as an accountable for as an individual. Yes, I absolutely agree. One of the foundational principles of our program is one size does not fit all. If we were to circle all the way back to the wheel, we do behaviors that make sense first, and then and I think maybe within that session, we have a whole bunch of different, this is not all 2 hours, some of them are 90 minutes, some of them are full days, like we do this in a whole bunch of different ways, but behaviors make sense first, and then the next thing is that one size does not fit all. That is a big part of our model, and that knowing who your audience is, knowing who you're talking to, different children are going to need different things. And I would even say that like a different child might need different things at different times of the day, different times of their development, different times of the year. Like, if they're tired, they might need one thing. If they're like balanced, they might need another thing. Absolutely. This is absolutely more of an art. So we are just trying to give you as many tools as possible, and we encourage you to be flexible. And again, what we said in the beginning, being effective for communication, you need to really step into your own body and into your own feelings. And what am I noticing here? What's coming up for me? How am I reacting to this? Am I getting red lights? Am I getting green lights? And you're right. One child might give you a red light where another might give a green. And you really need to know who your child is. So thank you. It's a very, very important point. Okay. Anything else before we wrap up here? I always love people's comments because I think
Julie, this is Rosemary speaking, and I was not present at a couple of, earlier meetings that you guys had, but I was just wondering about something that you actually mentioned at the beginning of your presentation about reaching bottom, and it is not actually supported by research, right? And so I was just wondering about the definition of it, because it can differ from person to person, can it?
Totally. I think that's fair. And some people might say that what my bottom is when I'm willing to change, and what somebody else's bottom is that's when they're willing to change. And for someone that might mean jail, for somebody else that might mean they don't like hangovers, and that bottoms can be very different from person to person. I think the point that we're trying to make there is just that, it's not as much of a nuance in this session as it is in some of the other sessions, but we impact motivation. And so just because somebody may not feel 100% ready to change, or they may not see themselves at a bottom, that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability through conversation and reinforcement and all kinds of other things to kind of gently guide them in the direction of change, even if they haven't felt a tremendous amount of consequences, and even if they don't feel like they're at any bottom, that there's still space in there for change to happen and for someone to move more away from substances rather than further into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that's especially true with like young adults because, you know, a lot of them have not had heavy consequences yet, right? They're not, you know, they're really still figuring out like who they are and where they want to go and how much they want to use. And they're, you know, they're like, I feel like especially, you know, and so they can, you know, they can end up getting, I'm not saying we can control it. We can't necessarily control it, but we can have an impact on whether or not someone goes more towards the substances. If we get judgmental and like resentful and punishing and we're not going to talk about this, you're never going to do that, like that's a choice, but that actually is shutting down the conversation and it's moving them more towards wanting to engage in the behavior than if we're curious and we're, you know, it's not to say you can't have consequences. You can actually have consequences and limits, but what's the flavor of it, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. I love people's questions. Okay. So here's our wheel. There's that little one size does not fit all that I talked about. So these are some of the sessions that if you want to go back and review the videos, behavior makes sense is the guy putting his hand on the stove here. One size does not fit all, and ambivalence is normal. And I did self-compassion last week, and so those are probably some of the videos that are up. And then we always end this training just by thinking about, you know, the work that's involved in being a parent and being a caregiver without any complications. And as we all know, bringing substance use into the mix just takes it to a whole other level of impact. And just to acknowledge the reality of all that's happening in this pandemic and in our world and in our country, you know, we're all holding a lot right now, and just want to sort of honor that. And part of why we end with this is really to encourage people every time to think about how can I sort of set these intentions for myself and live in a way that respects my own pain and my own struggle. So how can I care about myself today? What can I do for self-care? And, you know, that doesn't have to mean running out for a haircut or a manicure, you know, that can mean like making sure to sit down. For me, sometimes it's like sitting down when I'm eating dinner instead of standing up, because I'm always doing like so many things at one time that it can feel like even just like sitting down for dinner can be a kindness that I show myself. Enjoy, you know, what is there to enjoy today? I think, again, our brains have this negative bias. We might notice a lot of things that are painful. There is a lot of pain in the world. What's one thing that I can identify that I enjoyed today? And it can be really small. It was a great cup of coffee this morning. And connect with yourself. Remember what matters to you. Today I feel proud about getting on the bike, showing up for this training, allowing myself to sleep in an extra hour, affirming my child. So just trying to practice these things on a daily basis and remembering that part of doing this work and being in a place where we can communicate effectively is really feeling full ourselves on the inside. And if we're not there, then, you know, we're not really going to have what we need to give. So thank you all. I would love to be there. I don't know where it is, but it's very pretty. And thank you. Thank you for being here.